Okay, let's unpack this. We're all hearing, a lot about AI, right? Especially foundation models and the agents they power.
hmm Feels like they're everywhere.
Exactly. But looking at the sources you showed, something really fundamental seems to be shifting right now, specifically in how these agents, actually do things in the real world.
That's right. I think the key thing jumping out from, well, from these sources is that AI agents, while they're intelligent, they're designed to see, think, act.
Yeah.
They can't really accomplish anything useful all by themselves.
Right. They're not islands. They need to interact, pull in context, get data, access the ability to perform actions. And the main way they do that, according to these sources anyway.
APIs, application programming interfaces.
APIs, okay.
And this isn't just, another use case for APIs. The sources are pretty clear here. It's fundamentally transforming their role. APIs are moving beyond being just traditional integration points.
They're becoming, I think the sources called it the execution layer of AI. That sounds significant.
It really is. It's a big shift. And the sources, they highlight this rise of AI agents using APIs this way as maybe the most exciting thing happening in how foundation models are being applied today. It's where intelligence meets action.
And for you listening in, understanding this transformation, it's pretty critical. Because if APIs are the new execution layer, well, that's where a huge amount of the action is going to be, right? In building these AI-powered systems.
Knowing this helps you figure out where to focus.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to peel back the layers on these sources, understand exactly how AI agents are reshaping the role, the importance of APIs, and then look at how one major platform, Postman, is responding to this huge change.
Sounds good.
So let's dive into that core idea first. APIs as the execution layer. The sources describe these agents as intelligent apps that don't just talk, they see, they think, and they do. So they have this capability, right, to perceive and process.
Yes, they've got the intelligence part. But the crucial point, the one the sources keep hammering home, is their dependency. That ability to do things. It's gated.
Gated how?
They can't do anything useful in isolation.
Yeah.
They absolutely rely on connecting to the outside world.
And that connection method, it's not some, futuristic sci-fi thing. It's just APIs, good old APIs. That's how they get to the systems, the services, the data they need to make decisions and, well, carry out tasks.
Yeah, think about it simply. For an agent to, say, book a flight, what does it need?
An API to check fares, availability.
Right, to send an email.
An email API.
Update a CRM.
A CRM API, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is why the sources are calling APIs the execution layer. They are the actual mechanism through which the AI's intelligence gets executed.
Yeah.
Out there, in the real world.
It makes perfect sense when you put it like that. It's not just data flowing between systems anymore. It's AI using APIs like its hands and feet.
Well put. And yeah, the sources call this specific use case agents executing via APIs the most exciting development right now in foundation models.
It takes these incredibly powerful, sometimes abstract language models and gives them a practical purpose in actual automated workflows. So the big takeaway for you here is really recognizing that APIs aren't just the plumbing anymore. They're active components enabling AI systems to, interact and act in meaningful ways.
Okay, so if APIs are the execution layer, enabling agents to do things,
Yeah.
that means AI agents become a key consumer of APIs. And according to the sources, they're a new type and a particularly demanding type of consumer.
Demanding how? More demanding than, say, human developers.
Absolutely. We're sort of used to designing APIs for humans, right? Internal teams, maybe external partners.
Sure.
AI agents join that list, but there's a critical difference.
What exactly? How are they different?
Well, think about it. A human developer, right? If something goes wrong, they'll read the docs, maybe ask a question in Slack, try tweaking a parameter.
They'll troubleshoot. They'll adapt.
Precisely. They'll figure it out. But an AI agent, it's less forgiving. The sources put it pretty starkly, actually. An agent doesn't ask questions when things go wrong. They just stop. Workflow breaks.
Oh, that's high stakes. If the API isn't perfect, the whole automated thing just grinds to a halt.
Exactly. And this puts significant new demands on the APIs themselves. For agents to reliably use them, yeah, they need to be usable, sure, but critically, they need to be easily discoverable.
Okay.
Their descriptions, the documentation, must be accurately written. Like perfectly accurately, and they need to be kept consistently up to date.
Because, like the sources warn, if there's an inaccuracy, even a small one, in that API description, or if the agent tries to call a tool and it's slightly misaligned,
It's game over. Your agents stall and the workflow breaks.
Wow. No human in the loop to kind of nudge it in the right direction.
Right. And these systems, the ones powered by this agentic AI where these automated flows are running, they become even harder to observe and manage. That's another point the sources make.
Because if an agent stalls somewhere in a complex chain, figuring out why it stalled.
Yeah, it requires deep visibility into those API calls, what actually happened.
And the sources really emphasize that getting agents reliably into production, it needs the underlying LLMs to have the right context, the right reliability, and the right guardrails.
And a lot of that reliability, a lot of that context, it has to come from the APIs they're interacting with. They have to trust the APIs.
So for you, the listener, this means thinking about API quality, API documentation, with a whole new level of rigor. You're not just writing for other humans anymore.
Nope. You're writing for this hyper-literal, pretty unforgiving automated consumer.
Which immediately brings up a challenge the sources highlight, doesn't it? Getting these, creative, sometimes unpredictable generative LLMs that power the agents to reliably interact with the very structured, very specific world of APIs. LLMs sometimes. Well, they hallucinate, right?
Yeah.
They might imagine an API that doesn't exist, as the sources put it.
That's a huge problem. And that's exactly where specific tooling and protocols become absolutely essential. The sources point to MCP, that's the model chaining protocol, as really the dominant solution emerging right now.
MCP. Okay. The dominant way for agents to talk to the outside world via APIs. What does MCP actually do? How does it bridge that gap?
So it basically acts as like an abstraction layer for the LLMs. Instead of the model having to perfectly figure out a complex API request just from a text description,
right,
which is hard,
all right.
MCP gives the agent a standardized way to understand what tools, what APIs are available, and exactly how to interact with them. It helps the agent select and use the existing real APIs correctly.
So it stops them from just making things up. It gives the LLM a structured menu almost.
Exactly, a structured interface to the API universe.
Yeah.
And the sources mention how Postman is integrating this.
Yeah, how's that working?
Well, first, they're treating MCP as a first-class request type. So just like you'd work with HTTP or gRPC in Postman, you can now work directly with MCP.
Okay.
Which means you can actually take configurations from popular MCP clients, they mentioned Claude, ChatGPT, VS Code, and paste them right into Postman to debug the actual MCP interaction.
Whoa, okay. So you're debugging the agent's conversation with the API tool itself? That's pretty powerful.
It is. And they also apparently make it easy to turn existing APIs, like the public ones on the Postman API network, into an MCP server.
How easy?
Sounds like you can take an existing collection, or even just a single request, click a button basically, and it generates a ready-to-use tool description formatted specifically for an agent to understand via MCP.
Okay, so this protocol, MCP, and the tooling that supports it,
Yeah.
they're really crucial pieces for making that connection reliable between the sort of generative AI brain and the structured API body.
Yeah, it's all about enabling reliable action, not just, generating text.
Right. Building on that then, it's not just about agents calling individual APIs one by one. It's about using APIs as building blocks to create intelligent workflows that the agents can then execute. The sources say turning APIs into these intelligent AI-driven workflows is really key for building scalable agent systems.
Yeah, it's about orchestration. It requires defining the agent's job, basically. What are its responsibilities? How should it behave? What data and APIs does it need? And what are the logical steps it needs to follow to actually achieve its goal?
And the sources introduce Postman's approach here. They call it their AI Agent Builder Suite.
Yes, exactly. It's designed specifically to help users define, test, and deploy agents that, well, orchestrate actions using APIs. And a central piece of this suite is something called flows.
Flows. Okay, I remember seeing that. They're described as a visual builder for these multi-step intelligent workflows, sometimes called workflow agents.
Correct. And the key thing they emphasize here, the real innovation, seems to be its ability to connect APIs, external tools, maybe different AI models, define complex logic between them, manage the state across all those steps without requiring you to write code.
Wait, really? Building complex multi-step processes that cross different systems visually, that feels like a pretty significant jump.
It does. It aims to streamline creating these complex automations. These workflow agents you build with flows, they can handle repetitive tasks that might span, multiple different APIs, or even involve calling different LLMs for different parts of the task.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating is they can apparently be deployed with just one click to run in the cloud. and then be made available as APIs themselves.
So other agents could call these workflows.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
An agent could trigger another agent's complex workflow through a simple API call.
Okay, let's just picture this for a second for you listening. Imagine a process, right? Maybe today someone has to manually pull data from System A using its API, then send it over to System B via its API, maybe run it through an LLM for some analysis, and then update System C using another API.
Yeah, a common pattern.
These sources suggest you could build that entire multi-step logic visually using flows, have an agent execute it automatically, and then expose that whole complex workflow as a single API endpoint that another agent or even another system could just call.
It really does change how you might think about building automation, doesn't it? Less back-end code, potentially.
Definitely. Okay, so we've talked about agents needing reliable APIs and how these agentic systems can become hard to observe.
Right, the black box problem gets worse.
Which leads us directly to the critical need for, well, robust observability and debugging tools in this new world.
Absolutely vital. I mean, when you have potentially autonomous agents making decisions, executing sequences of actions through APIs, maybe across a whole ecosystem of microservices, it becomes incredibly difficult to figure out what's actually happening under the hood. And more importantly, why did something fail?
And the sources introduce a specific solution for this from Postman. Postman Insights.
Right. Insights is pitched as giving you real-time visibility into how your APIs behave in production. Which is crucial, right? Because how an API acts under real production load with real user traffic can be very different from your test environment.
So what kind of visibility are we talking about?
Well, tracking traffic patterns, just understanding usage, detecting failure patterns, spotting spikes in 401s or 500 errors, sort of an early warning system, and setting up alerts, obviously, to get notified immediately when things go wrong.
Okay, standard observability stuff, but focused on APIs.
Yeah.
But for debugging those failures, there's a specific feature they highlighted that sounded really interesting. Repro mode.
Yes.
Yeah.
This one sounds like a bit of a superpower for debugging, honestly. Repro mode apparently lets you take an actual failed request that happened in production with real user traffic.
Okay.
And reproduce the entire request packet. So the payload, the headers, the parameters, everything, right inside Postman for instant debugging.
Instant debugging of a production failure.
That's the claim. The sources mentioned it's been a huge win for them internally, dramatically speeding up diagnosing those tricky production issues.
That makes total sense. If an agent workflow breaks because of some API call way down the chain, you need to see exactly what the agent sent and what it got back at that specific moment. Reproducing the live failure, that's invaluable for finding the root cause quickly.
It's pretty essential for building and maintaining trust, I think, in systems where these autonomous processes are running around.
Okay, so we've covered agents consuming APIs, using APIs to build workflows, observability, but the sources also kind of flip the script a bit. AI agents are also becoming a teammate in the API development process itself.
Right, AI helping the humans who build the APIs.
Ah.
This is where the sources introduce agent mode in Postman, an AI agent integrated right into the developer's workspace.
And it's described as a conversational agent. So is it just like a chatbot giving advice?
No, apparently much more than that.
Yeah.
The sources call it a full-blown teammate. And the reason is it doesn't just tell you things. It could actually do everything that a user can do within Postman.
Wait, hold on. It can perform actions in the tool based on a prompt. You mean like sending requests, making collections, writing API tests?
Precisely. You interact with it through prompts, ask it to do things, and it can execute those tasks right there in your workspace. It's designed to help developers troubleshoot APIs faster, reproduce errors they're hitting, figure out how to fix them, and update their API workspaces, all through conversation.
That sounds incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Especially for getting unstuck on tricky problems. And can it use that production data we talked about from Insights?
Yes, that's a key integration. You can leverage data from Postman Insights. So you could ask it, are other users seeing this 500 error on the checkout endpoint? And it could pull that production data to tell you if the problem you're debugging is widespread. The sources even share an anecdote. Apparently, agent mode reduced the time needed to fix one particularly difficult API issue from over 10 minutes down to just 5 seconds.
10 minutes to 5 seconds. Okay, that kind of productivity jump is, well, it's hard to ignore.
It really is. And they also mentioned this mode will be extendable via APIs and MCP itself, suggesting its capabilities could grow even further, maybe interact with other tools you use.
The sources also briefly mentioned a couple of other AI features, right? Like an AI request feature for testing LLMs directly.
Yeah, and a model comparison template for evaluating different LLMs against each other for specific tasks within your workflow, right inside Postman.
So what this points to for you, the listener, is AI becoming an active participant in how you actually build and manage your APIs, not just something your APIs talk to.
Right. Imagine having an AI assistant that doesn't just suggest code, but can actually run the tests, update the documentation, diagnose the production error alongside you.
That's a different way of working. Okay, stepping back just a little bit to connect all these pieces, the sources also talk about how Postman's platform more broadly is evolving to support this whole agent-centric world. They frame it around beating these challenges they call bosses.
Right, like the disconnected stack, the invisible API, the inconsistent system, these sort of meta problems in API development.
And they highlight other developments that maybe aren't directly AI features, but they form the essential groundwork. Things like improving collaboration and structure.
Yeah, level one, they called it. Features like collections for prototyping, Spec Hub for governance as you scale, integrations with GitHub, Jira, VS Code to reduce context switching.
And then improving distribution and adoption level 2. Features like organizations for managing bigger teams, the private API network for finding and reusing internal APIs.
And a public API network for external discovery. They mentioned over 100,000 public APIs are on there now.
Yeah, quite a number. Plus things like partner workspaces, notebooks on the network for interactive docs, activity feeds, chat integrations for updates.
Right. The key takeaway here, connecting it back to the agents,
Yeah.
is that all these features aim to make sure APIs are high quality, they're easy to find, they're well documented, they're properly managed.
And as the sources imply, that foundational quality, that discoverability, it's absolutely necessary if APIs are going to function reliably as the execution layer for AI agents.
Exactly. The agents need stable, understandable building blocks to work with. You
Yep.
can't build reliable AI workflows on shaky API foundations.
So summing up this whole deep dive into the sources,
Yeah.
wow, it seems incredibly clear that AI agents are not just hype. They're here, and they are fundamentally changing the game for APIs.
Yeah, APIs are really moving from being sort of passive data conduits
Right.
to being active components that let AI systems perceive, think, and crucially, act in the real world.
And that big transformation, it demands a much higher standard for our APIs. They absolutely must be reliable, easily discoverable, accurately described, especially for this new, less forgiving AI consumer.
In this new reality, it's clearly driving rapid innovation in the tools we use. We've seen how platforms are adding things like MCP support for reliable interaction.
Visual builders like flows for creating intelligent workflows without needing to be a coder.
Production observability with really powerful debugging like repro mode.
And even AI teammates like agent mode to help developers build and manage the APIs in the first place.
All of these developments feel like direct responses to APIs becoming that critical execution layer for AI.
Which leaves us with a really powerful final thought, I think, building on where these sources seem to be pointing. If AI agents become increasingly autonomous, performing really complex tasks by relying on this ecosystem of high-quality interconnected APIs as their execution layer, what does that actually mean for the future role of us humans?
Yeah, how do we monitor these things? How do we manage them? How do we even design them effectively? What new skills, what new perspectives become the most valuable in a world where maybe AI teammates are helping us build the APIs?
That other autonomous agents then use to interact with the world. It's definitely something to think about.
A fascinating challenge and a huge opportunity as this whole evolution continues to unfold.